Thank you very much, Tan Sri Michael, Datuk Paramjit and Associate Professor Ilaj Solan. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, ladies and gentlemen, friends, and my esteemed and distinguished panel speakers. We are supposed to have 5 this morning. Unfortunately, Dr. Vincent has taken ill, so he will not be around with us, and Ms. Prabha will be meeting us online this morning. I think we have slightly longer time. I just told our speakers, and they will have probably slightly longer time to speak, or at the same time probably we can have more questions from the floor. That will be, I think, more appropriate and given more opportunities for audience to participants to ask questions then. Okay, so this session is on filling the human capital gaps in the post-pandemic. I'm not sure whether we are already in the post-pandemic. I thought we are still at it, and I'm not sure how long will it last. However, I think we all are aware that the world has transformed so much, not only due to the pandemic alone, but also because of the continued march of digitalisation and automation. New technologies, industry, IR 4.0, and etc. And all these are taking hold of these sectors, whether they are in the public sectors or private or services or manufacturing. I think they are all affected by all this. And we in the education institutions, whether in the K-12 schools or higher education, have a big role in keeping abreast and be ahead of the curve in producing graduates with the right human capital skill set that required for the future. So hence, what type of skills do employees and employers need to have to continue to be effective for the proper functionings of their organizations? Over the past 2 years or so, there have been significant changes in the mode of teaching and learning. Hybrid and virtual means of delivery is becoming more and more of the norm. In this context, we ask this question: how will higher education institutions proceed, schools proceed in educating the children? Is it going to be business as usual, or will they be more proactive and be ahead of at least keep abreast with the changes that are taking place, all for the better in all respects, for that matter? So we also ask this question: what type of jobs are there going to be in the future, and how should educators be preparing students for these new jobs or future jobs, especially? Some debates have taken place as well over the quality of graduates that we produce in I'm talking about our local universities, with some even insinuating about their unemployability. They graduate, they are not able to work, companies are not taking them, they need to be retrained and retrained again. So these are all involving a lot of resources and so on. This is a problem that cannot be ignored, as its consequences will be felt by both the future employees and employers alike. So all these and more areas will be addressed by the panelists on this particular session, on filling the human capital gaps in the post-pandemic. I find this topic, this theme, to be very, very challenging. We need to answer a lot of questions. There are so many questions that have been prepared. I will leave it to them, for them to answer. So as indicated earlier, each speakers will be given about 8 minutes to speak, and I hope that they are not going to exceed the time to be fair to the rest. That after that we can have question and answer, give the chance for our participants to ask questions. The speaker's profile, I don't think I'm going to read it here. I think as being done by the earlier group. But however, I am truly honored and pleased to introduce our esteemed and our distinguished panel speakers this morning. With me, we have Professor David Whitford, the President and CEO of RCSI and UCD Malaysia campus. We have Ms. Yong Yiling, the Head of Talents and Operation for TFM, Teach for Malaysia, and Ms. Wei Su Hua, Co-founder and Director for Digital Way Academy. We will also have Ms. Prabha Sundram. Are you already here, Prabha? Not yet? The Head Education Malaysia. Yes, she's already here for British Council. She has back-to-back meetings, so she's not able to come here. And unfortunately, we'll be missing Dr. Vincent Kwok Liang Chiang, the Director for Fairview International School. We'll get him next year, probably. So without further ado, let me hand over the first question probably to Prof. Can I ask you the first question? So the question that I'm going to ask him, basically, it could be, this question could also lead to other type of briefing and explanation. How well equipped are universities in preparing students for the workplace of the future? This question was sort of asked earlier on in the section, but let us hear the perspective of Prof. Is that right? Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Satana, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My personal background is that I've spent about half my life working as a doctor full-time, and then the other half in academia. And I suppose during the time I was a doctor, I was employing various staff, and quite often was critical of universities for not adequately preparing them for the workplace. And then I moved into academia, and I attend meetings with industry and particularly hospital directors and consultants, and I hear the same complaints coming from them, and of course now have to defend that sort of side of things. And just on Monday I was at a meeting in Penang. Talent Corps have opened an office up there, and a lot of tech industry leaders, CEOs were there, and they were saying exactly the same thing again. So the question then arises, well, what is the issue? So drilling down on it, it's not so much that degrees don't actually produce the knowledge that's needed to actually go into jobs and so on. And particularly in my field, which is largely medical, we have a more or less 100% employment. If you look at employment alone, all of our graduates get jobs because they all become doctors and they go into medicine. But I would question whether all of them were fully employable, and I'm not talking about my own institution, but doctors as a whole, because we know that even in, within Malaysia, that only about 60% of the doctors going into internship actually complete it in the requisite 2 years. And a lot of them actually have to repeat periods of time because they're not deemed to be up to the standard that the Ministry of Health actually requires. So you actually say, well, yes, they have employment, they have a job, but are they really employable? And I think that then raises the question as to what we're doing as universities and where we're at. So when I was on Monday evening, I was talking to some of the CEOs about this very question, and it really does come down to the fact that when we're looking at things from a university perspective, our students are able to pass theoretical exams, they're able to have the knowledge necessary, but when it comes down to it, what the employers are actually looking for in terms of employability, and I think it may be semantics, but I'd say there's a very real difference between being in employment and being employable. What they're looking for in terms of employability are skills that are not always easy to be assessed in the educational sphere, either in schools or in higher education. And I tend to split them into three areas, those skills that employers are looking for. One are the cognitive sort of skills. The digital skills, which obviously the pandemic has really promoted, are absolutely necessary, and critical thinking, which universities should be engaged in, but actually goes right back to education in schools. And even before that, actually, the importance of education before the age of about 7 has been shown time and time again as being really paramount to the way that people develop educationally in the future. So that's one of the areas. The other area that employers are looking for is really social skills and what we now know as emotional intelligence. That whole area Can you be empathic with people? Can you interact with people? Can you relate to people? And that side of things, and can you actually take those areas on? And that's the second area I look at. And the third area is adaptability. What people have been talking about earlier, the agility of universities, but it's also the agility, the adaptability of individuals, and the resilience that they actually have. And so lots of those things, I believe, are actually largely formulated before some students get to the university level. But universities actually do have a responsibility to actually be processing those more. And probably it's not been seen as an outcome or as strong an outcome as it might have been by universities in the past. Increasingly, it's becoming seen as something that we have to be looking at with our students. But the actual development, the teaching of it, and the assessment of it that universities can go through is the sort of evidence base behind it and how it's actually done is relatively weaker than it is in some of the areas which is just pure knowledge base that universities do. So I suppose when it comes to the crunch, universities are good at actually transmitting knowledge and even sort of developing some of the higher level cognitive skills, the reasoning and that sort of side of things. But in the other areas that are softer areas, in the past, maybe universities haven't seen it as their sole responsibility. And when people were talking earlier about opening up campuses and everything, it is probably one of the areas that has been developed less through Zoom calls and the rest of it. Certainly when I've done bits of teaching over the last year or two, the fact that you can't get eye contact with people, you can't relate to them in the same way on Zoom calls and everything, or in fact that some of the students don't have their cameras on, they're probably lying in bed when you're actually teaching and doing so, actually leads you to sort of wonder, well, what's happening to some of those softer skills that employers are looking for? So I suppose what I'd say is that as universities, we do have to look at developing more research around those areas of actually how we actually implement those. We have to make sure also that we actually interact a lot more. The other side of things I want to say is the interaction with industry, which is important, because without listening to industry and just hearing the criticisms of university, we can come around to the fact that maybe they're just critical of our degrees or something like that, but we actually have to be integrating a lot more with industry. A lot of academics have not been in industry for a very long time and have lost touch with what industry is actually looking for, but it is a lot of these things. So when it comes to the crunch, we need industry a lot more involved in universities. Universities have to be a lot more involved in industry. Learning is a lifelong endeavor. It doesn't stop at school or at university or any stage. It carries on through industry. But what universities have to be doing is integrating industry more into the university curricula to actually be advising on the characteristics, the skills that they actually want for their employees so that universities actually go on and develop those. So I suppose that's probably the main thing I'd want to say, that, and going back to the main fact that I have, what we should be thinking of is not employment, but employability. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I think that's very interesting views. I think the market, whether in schools or universities or higher learning institutions, we have been talking about the social skills, the emotional quotient, the communications, and critical thinking that we talk about. I think, in fact, critical thinking subject has been subsumed in our K-12 education in our school. Prof, I just would like to ask you a little bit more. Do you think that this aspect of communication, soft skills, not only should be done by the university, not only from the school, because they should be seamless, but should also be the responsibilities of parents, communities, and so on? What do you think of that? In how could we do that as well?
I 100% agree. I think as I referred to, so there is evidence that a lot of the way that we develop as personalities is fairly formulated by the age of about 7. It's a bit frightening if you're a parent that you have so little influence on your kids. But it is the reality that you've only got that window up to that sort of age that really determines the personality. And so the parenting skills are quite important. And I suppose that comes down to, well, you know, the assumption made is that parents are just born, and you know, you basically get married, have kids, and that somehow or other you magically have all the skills for parenting. Again, we don't actually spend as much time in society as we might do, both in schooling and even at higher education level. I don't hardly any, to actually look at, well, what are we doing to give the skills to parents to actually contribute towards their children's education and development. So, yeah.
Thank you. It is very interesting. I think I've been involved in policy in the school level more than higher education. I think this aspect is one of the most fundamental that we keep talking about it. Without the social skill, without the emotional aspect of children being trained or being educated from the very early age, as early as early childcare time, they will grow up differently. So it is interesting. I think now the universities are beginning to realize that if they can get a job, but not necessarily they can get the right job or they can perform in their job. Thank you, Prof. So let me move on to our second speaker. Probably I will invite from TFM first. Can I please, Ms. Yong?
Yes, sure.
Yes, please. And the question that probably I would like to ask, let me ask a specific question related to this. What kind of leadership do we require post-pandemic or during pandemic, especially with the rise of digitalisation? So perhaps you want to elaborate on that particular question, but you can always move on into something a little bit more than that.
Sure.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dato' Satina. So I think before I go into my point, I just want to say that I truly resonate with what Prof. David has said around the difference between just being employed and also employability, because I think there is definitely a significant difference when we think about whether a person is able to really perform at their role or just merely being employed. And I think this is something that in Teach for Malaysia, so I've been working as a recruiter and also a selector for the Teach for Malaysia Fellowship, where we bring in young talent, whether it's young professionals or also fresh graduates, to join the 2-year fellowship. And we've seen a lot of different people apply, and also the type of people that actually come through and succeed in getting a position. And I think what we can really see is that a lot of times for those who are not able to get a position or get the role, we don't just boil it down to the university education, but actually, in fact, all the way to their school education as well. Because what the school produces is who is going to go to the universities. And so I think that's why it really emphasizes on the importance of holistic education, even at the stage of primary and secondary school. And this is why in Teach for Malaysia, one thing that we emphasized on when our fellows actually go into classrooms and teach students is this concept of really holistic education and also student leadership. So things that we are looking at include, so for example, social emotional learning. We look at resilience, we look at entrepreneurship skills, as well as communication, which are all the soft skills that, and also critical thinking that we see is critical for a person to get employed. But instead of, just only starting to look at those things in university, we feel that it's important that it's really cultivated at a young age, even at the school level. And I think we've also been able to observe how this pandemic has really shifted the way that we are looking at education in schools. And we see that the recent abolishment of UPSR is a great example of how this pandemic has, in a way, positively transformed education to focus less on just academic excellence, but also holistic education as well. And I think moving on from student leadership to leadership that we want to see in the workplace, some of the things that we've been able to see that is important is that a lot of people who are looking for jobs these days, a lot of young people fresh out of university who are actually seeking employment have a very, I would say, a very clear awareness of what's happening socially. I think we've seen that shift from 10 years ago until today. There's a very strong conscious understanding of what are the social issues that are plaguing the world, and so there's also a really strong desire to be able to contribute, not just to earn a living, but also to contribute purposefully to the society as well. And so I think one thing that we notice is that in terms of being able to bring in leaders who are able to contribute purposefully to the workplace, some leadership elements that we feel are important are things around critical consciousness. So the ability to be really understanding the intersection and the interplay between social, economic, and political issues, and also how it affects the global issues that we are seeing, whether it's education inequity, poverty, because the element of critical consciousness allows these young people to be able to look into the root causes without just touching the surface of the problem. Also being willing to challenge status quo and really being willing to understand that they have an ability and an agency to create change. And last but not least, also I think the belief that actually change is possible. So I think those are some of things that are important within critical consciousness that we are looking for in young people these days. I think another thing that we feel like is very important is the ability to engage with communities, because these days it's no longer just engaging with your colleagues or just mere stakeholders. I think engaging with communities allows you to have a wider understanding of issues that are happening and how to really resolve issues from an in-depth level. And I think also alluding to what Prof. David said just now, adaptability and resilience, of course, is definitely something that is critical as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Interesting. TFM, Teach for Malaysia, has been in our country since 2010. Yes. Started in 2010. Yeah. I was still in the ministry, and I was one of them pushing this program, because at the end of it we can see a group of graduates that achieve a lot better than many other graduates, willing to become teachers. They get into the system, they get trained for 3 months, if I'm not mistaken, and they go to schools, the B40 schools, some of them in the rural area, they are just fantastic. And some of them, they manage to stay in the profession. Some of them get out of it because, of course, you need to earn. But I think when the government not able to really compensate them in the way that they expect to have, so some of them will leave, but they continue to serve in education in different manners. So I want to ask you, it is interesting, your keywords there actually is communication, being able to communicate, being able to work with the communities. But I want to ask this particular question. I always ask this question in my heart. If there is an employer who wants to employ someone, interview a group of people to work in their companies, some of the quality, one is with a first-class degree, amazing credential, amazing qualification. The other one probably a bit mediocre. But you have some of them who are extremely honest, extremely humble, with humility, with commitment, no arrogance, and so on. So between academic qualification and values that been inculcated from small, from young, from school, what do you think would, nowadays, what do you think would employer choose if they want to have these young people to come and work for them? I do believe that you can train, anybody can be trained if they have the right mindset. Perhaps you might want to give your views.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dato' Satina. So I think from a perspective of someone who's working in human resource, and I believe that I can say on behalf of Teach for Malaysia as well, I think the values and the desire to learn is definitely much more critical than just mere academic qualification. But when I say this, I'm not downplaying the importance of getting good grades or the importance of academics, which we've seen is definitely crucial. But to solely decide on hiring someone or placing a lopsided emphasis on academic qualification is, in my opinion, also perpetuating the idea of education inequity, because we see that a lot of students and a lot of children who do not have access to good quality education or do not have access to opportunities tend to lag behind in terms of academic qualification, despite having a lot of, let's say, for example, a lot of other skills or a lot of other strong values as well. So I think in thinking about employability, I feel that it's something that needs to be balanced and not just lopsided, like focusing on academic qualification only. Yeah.
Thank you. We leave that for a while, and we'll come back later. Yeah, with more questions. Let me move on to our third speaker this morning. We have Ms. Wei Sui Hua, co-founder and director from Digital Way Academy. So, a question for you: what type of skills are highly demanded in the job market nowadays? Digital skills and soft skills. Perhaps you want to elaborate on that? Yeah? Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. So I think before I start to answer that question, I'll just very briefly introduce myself. I come from a background of neuroscience, specializing in educational neuroscience, and I co-founded this Digital Way Academy, which is an education social enterprise, together with Dato' Wei, who has been a long-time industry veteran in the digital and the IT industry. And the reason why we did that actually is because we want to unite together the different stakeholders, right? Industry, government, education institutions, in order to design the most effective education solutions, most relevant and most effective education solutions in order to build human capacity for the digital era. And as Prof. Whitford has said just now as well, sometimes universities, right, they get lost of touch with the industry. Yeah, so that's why that's one of the areas that we're focusing on as well. All right, so that's just a quick introduction. I think in order to answer that question, Datuk Satina, I'll first just give an overview of what we're seeing on the ground. I know we don't like to talk about some of the social issues, right? In fact, sometimes we avoid talking about it. It is a bit of a sad topic, but in order to just illustrate what's happening, I think I'll just share a couple of stats, international and also local stats as well. We can see that World Economic Forum, they actually did a study on Malaysia, on the future of jobs. And what we saw, right, is that actually quite a lot of low-skilled jobs, right, are being automated, and it's becoming redundant at the moment. We're looking at around 21.7% of Malaysia's workforce that's in these roles, job roles that's actually soon to be redundant. And at the same time, companies know that they need to adopt digital in order to survive and thrive, right? This trend of digitalization, some people only became aware of it during the pandemic, but definitely it's long been around. And in fact, I would say that the pandemic merely just accelerated the process of digitalization for companies and organizations and the government. Yeah, so, and not just that, right? We're also seeing that companies in Malaysia, those who adopted digital technology during the pandemic, they saw that their business performances actually grew by, 150% on average. And I also have some of my friends who are running some businesses, and they say that as soon as they implement a digital business model, right, a more innovative business model, they actually saw in the scale of 100x revenue growth, right? So we can see that that is where the job market is actually moving towards, which is adoption of digital technology. In different ways, right? In order to improve the productivity of operations, in order to better innovate, in order to better, engage with the customers and bring value to their customers. Yeah, so we can see that that is a major shift. And in fact, what is being projected at the moment by World Economic Forum is that 8 out of 10 of the emerging jobs are going to require digital skills. And even those that don't, like for example, business development, right? Project managers. We know what kind of projects they'll be working on, right? Many of them will be digital in nature as well. Yeah, so I think this is a trend that definitely cuts across the industries. And we see that, unfortunately, there was quite a high unemployment rate within the country. In fact, all-time high in about 3 decades. And even fresh graduates who managed to get a job, we see that a lot of them are underpaid as well, severely underpaid, right? And that just points to, I would identify one of the root causes to be a critical mismatch between education and employment, whether or not education prepares the youths well for the world of employment, the world of work, and also for those who are already in the workforce, as these digital technologies actually come on and take us all by the storm, right? How can we actually reskill and upskill ourselves? Yeah, so just echoing what already has been shared, right? The notion of lifelong learning definitely needs to become a norm. People, I would say, should see lifelong learning as something led by curiosity and for them to actually better add value to the world, instead of seeing it in the light of, I'm not good enough and that's why I need to upskill, reskill. That's definitely not how I see it. Definitely, I think everybody needs to play an active role in upskilling, reskilling themselves as a lifelong learner. Yeah. Just one last statistic to paint the picture would be My Digital, which is the Malaysia Digital Economy Blueprint, which was released from the Prime Minister's office, actually said and estimated that 500,000 digital jobs will be created by 2025, right? So where are we going to get all these digital talents? And also, it also asks a second question, which is what are the types of skills that are demanded in the job market? So directly answering your question now, Datuk Satina.
Yes.
It would certainly digital skills, and second pillar would be I would call it in general more of a life competencies, covering soft skills as well. So in terms of digital skills, the ones that are in general, the ones that are highly in demand at the moment would be things like software and application programming, data analysis, data science, digital marketing, digital media design, and e-commerce. These are at least on the base level, what companies across industries are looking for in terms of digital skills. Of course, there's a lot of other emerging technologies as well that would perhaps be more adopted by, high-tech companies, like things like blockchain, IoT. Those would be adopted by more technology-based companies. And in terms of soft skills and live competencies, we often talk about soft skills, but I actually think that we need to focus in a more broad sense of life competencies, because it's not just soft skills of things like leadership, communication, but also things like mindset. Yeah, how can we equip people with growth mindset to be resilient and to grow through challenges? And things like values as well. What kind of values do we hold? What is our sense of purpose? Our motivation, right? Understanding what are our interests, our strengths, how can we contribute to the world around us, and of course what gets us paid as well. Those kind of things are important considerations besides just soft skills. Yeah, so I think in the digital era, definitely these are a couple of things that we really need to think about, especially as we start to evolve towards a gig economy, right? Where people are expected to, people thrive if they really know what they're good at and what they're interested in doing, what they love doing, and how they can contribute to the world. Yeah, so that's just a quick overview from me.
Thank you. That's very, very interesting. So people like me, we are already in the 6th series. It's really mind-boggling. We need to relearn, we need to unlearn, we need to do so many things. I think many of us here are going through the same thing. If you want to be relevant, you want to be still working and contributing, but you can't just sit down and not wanting to learn about all this. It's interesting. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from you today, this morning, this session. But it is interesting when we talk about the soft skills. We talk about the importance of learning all the latest technology, your mindset, and so on. This morning, we had a couple of questions regarding the policy of the government. I also would like to ask this question later on. That probably might hinder. I'm just wondering sometimes, in the universities, for example, Prof, you think that doctors will exist in the future after 10, 15 years? Or probably people might, no, I will not ask you that question yet. Let me ask her first. That could be just one question. But I just would like to ask you, the next one that go. In this instance, how can actually education prepare individuals for the shifting job market demand, especially with the high demand for digital competencies? That is my next question. And I also would like you to talk a little bit about English as a medium of communication, whereby that we are having a lot of issues. I had a shock of my life when I heard the announcement by the minister, the Prime Minister, that we, sorry, I have to say this, that anybody can quote me. I thought we are going backward, not moving forward. And so when we talk about digital competencies, they're all in English. What are we going to do about that? Yeah, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. So the first part, right, is what education? What kind of education do we need? And second part is English as a medium. Yeah, so addressing the first question first, what do I think about it? Yeah, so what kind of education do we need to prepare people to be digitally competent? I would just break it down into two different sections to think about. The first one is the curriculum, and the second one is the pedagogy, or in other ways of describing it, it's the teaching and learning methods. So in terms of the curriculum, definitely, as we can see, the skills demand is shifting very quickly. It is about how companies and organizations and government are implementing these kind of technologies, right? And that is the kind of skill sets that we need. So definitely when we're designing the curriculum, we will need a lot of feedback from the industry. So putting industry experts on the same table as education experts and having the voices represented across the board, perhaps even students, right? Students who are in the community, they are on the ground. They perhaps also know what are some of the trends that are happening within the community. Yeah, so in terms of the curriculum, I think if we can actually bring together these parties to sit down and think, right, voice out what do we really need to learn in the curriculum in order to be digital ready, to be ready for the industry, to be ready for work. Yeah, so that's the approach, in my opinion, and of course that would cut across multiple different areas as well. I would say that in order to enable digital transformation, there are three areas at the very least that we need to focus on. The first area is digital business. So how do we enable and facilitate modern digital businesses. So that is things like digital transformation, digital workplace management, business analytics, digital sales and marketing. Those kind of knowledge and skills and abilities are very important. So that's the first area. Second area would be in software technology. So in other words, how do we innovate and create some of those technologies that's required. And the third area is digital systems. So once we have all of these digital technology up and running, right, we're going to have lots of hardware, we're going to have lots of software, lots of network. Just as the first panel we're talking about as well, you know, there's so many things to consider in the digital infrastructure. So we also need digital systems people to be able to link together all of these into a reliable infrastructure, and this also includes things like cloud technology, like cybersecurity as well. Yeah, so that's answering the first part of the question.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have, thank you. We will have more questions later. We have with us now on Zoom, Prabha from British Council. We have Prabha Sundram, the Head Education Malaysia, British Council. She's online, she's on Zoom. So Prabha, can I hand over to you? Yeah, Prabha. And the question that I would like to ask would be, with the rise in remote work, do you think companies will be hiring more internationally? What are the implications that you think that will arise? And you can talk about internalization as well in this aspect. Over to you, Prabha. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dato', and good afternoon to everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person today. So I'm going to turn this question slightly on its head. All our research and indications from both the Malaysian sector and the UK sector point to the fact that it's not so much a case of hiring internationally, but more towards hiring graduates who have that international outlook and that global skills set that's needed for the job. You don't really need to, I think this came out in the previous panel about job matching and whether you need to hire internationally or hire locally. I don't think, at this point, I don't think companies are looking so much about hiring internationally. What they want is hiring graduates who have that flexibility, who have that global skill set that's needed, that can enable them to really perform at the job that they're required to do. This again comes down to the human capital, right, that we're talking about in this session. What the pandemic has done, which was mentioned by one of the panelists just now, is that it has actually hastened this process of digitalization. It has become a catalyst. We used to have this traditional mindset of global graduates, mobility. Students have to go to another country, another university, attach themselves there, either for a semester, for a year, or for a work placement or an attachment. But what has the pandemic done? It closed all the borders. What did the universities do? What did the companies, the employers do who needed interns? They came up with creative ways of looking at virtual mobility. They came up with creative ways of removing those, sort of artificial boundaries that we've always been bound by in terms of our, mindset on mobility. As far as universities were concerned, mobility means you send your students there. But that's no longer the case, is it? Universities have responded very creatively to that process of enabling that exchange to happen, enabling that kind of development of global attributes that graduates need to continue even during this time of the pandemic. I would agree it's not post-pandemic, but even during this pandemic and in the landscape moving forward. Now, that is something that we at the British Council are trying to facilitate. And we have always been facilitating mobility. Mobility has been very high on the agenda, both for the UK and for the Malaysian higher education sectors. But I think with the current situation, with the closing of the borders, we have also tried to create environments and platforms that can enable digital mobility to take place. digital workplace attachment to take place. What we have realized is that many universities in the UK, in terms of student mobility, most of the universities in the UK include outward mobility in their institutional strategic plan, and almost half of the universities have dedicated budgets and strategies that have been put towards outward mobility. So they realize, graduates need to get skills which are outside the norm of the curriculum, what the university can offer within the university. They need to get these kind of soft skills, competencies, workplace competencies, whatever you call it, and that can only be obtained through attachments and through experiencing cultures, through exchanges. Many of the universities still continue having budgets for outward mobility, and I'm very pleased to say that's the same case for Malaysia. We've had many conversations with the Ministry of Higher Education, with the Vice Chancellors and Deputy Vice Chancellors of internationalization at the local universities, and actually there's so much happening in the space of exchange and mobility. There's so much of support for it, and it's almost one of those things that the pandemic has accelerated in terms of how much more can be done in that space, and how creatively we can circumvent some of the issues that we thought were issues, right? So when you think about mobility, you're thinking about semester or year-long study abroad programs. You're thinking about short-term programs, work placements, volunteering, even with the NGOs and not-for-profits. All of these are huge opportunities for students to actually get these critical skills that they would need to then go back and be hired by organizations which are looking for international graduates. So organizations now, or companies, don't need to look for hiring internationally, but looking towards hiring graduates who come with that international experience, be it international experience that they gathered through digital means, virtual means, or in-person means. One of the key things that we have been doing at the British Council is trying to facilitate the partnerships between UK and Malaysian institutions that can actually kick off or spur more exchanges, more opportunities, more collaborations. So yesterday, I'm really happy to share that we actually had the launch and first meeting of the UK-Malaysia University Consortium, which is a platform which we have kickstarted together with the MOHE to look at how UK and Malaysian institutions can work more strategically across a variety of areas, teaching and learning, research, exchanges, and mobility, looking at how universities can put in place processes that can facilitate online attachments, online placements, online what they call COIL, collaborative online international learning. All of these are opportunities for students to go beyond where they are at, whether it's at their campus in Malaysia or whether it's at their campus in the UK. These are opportunities for more students to participate in these things. What the pandemic has hastened is that we are no longer bound by the fact that what if a student does not have the money to travel, right? So we've actually we have narrowed that divide. There's an increasing number of widening participation students who can actually go abroad or be attached abroad via platforms such as the UK-Malaysia University Consortium, via many other platforms that universities have, because the cost has now been reduced, but the experience has been enhanced by the fact that these students can now interact, can learn, can embrace those cultures that perhaps they could not have done when they actually needed to go there in person to do it. So being a global graduate is something that is really going to take off. It was always there, but there was always this question of, is it only open to an elite number of students? Does everyone have the opportunities? How many people can actually go on exchanges? But all of those barriers have now been broken down. It was about to happen at some point, but now it has been accelerated, and now it is up to the higher education institutions and the students themselves to look at how to creatively look at gaining these critical skills that can then enable them to become global graduates.
Thank you, Prabha. Very interesting. Yeah, you were talking about yesterday, you all launched the UK Malaysia consortium, university consortium.
Yeah.
I want to bring this back to way back in the late 1997, 1998. Actually, we have had this type of relationship for a long time, but not digitally. It was face-to-face. We had, I think Malaysia was one of the country that introduced 3+0, 4+0, 3+1, 2+2 programs, whereby we work together with foreign university, especially from the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and different places. So this type of relationship has been happening for a long time. But as you said so, with technology, things now has moved on. So I would like to ask this question from you. It's not totally what you said. You see what is happening now, and it is very interesting to see universities, even schools, public school, private school, during the pandemic, they were extremely creative. They were doing a lot of things, and I know definitely international school and private school were extremely creative, and they were doing a lot of things to help the students. Likewise in the university as well. So do you think that some of the policies that is in existence now, it is a bit sensitive question, but you are not with the universities, you can answer this question. Do you think that some of these policies being asked by the government, whether it is MQA or Higher Education Ministry, has put a lot of hindrances, a lot of slowing down in terms of how they can move forward? Actually, they are amazing. These universities, our local universities are amazing. The homegrown universities, not to talk about University of Malaya, my alma mater, I think our VC is still here. But they are just amazing. But do you think that something should be done about this? They should allow them to be independent. They should empower them to move forward? Prabha, what do you think?
Thank you so much, Dato. And just on a side note, UM is my alma mater also. So I'm really pleased that that it's yours as well. So this has been a question that we have been grappling with a little bit, because when the pandemic hit, so whilst there was always this this thing about accreditation of qualifications, and we have very stringent requirements under the MQA, by and large, actually, the sector, the higher education sector overseas, regards the Malaysian quality assurance processes very, very highly. Sometimes in Malaysia, we're very hard on ourselves, and we don't realize how highly regarded our QA processes, or for that matter, our higher education processes, are actually looked at from the overseas perspective. So for example, UK sector has the highest regard for the Malaysian QA processes, because they are rigorous, and being rigorous gives a foreign country the confidence to come in and set up either a transnational education program or a branch campus. I mean, we are home to 5 UK branch campuses, and we have so many other branch campuses as well in Malaysia. That's very, very unique to Malaysia, and that's largely because they have that confidence in our systems, which means that the system itself, in answer to your question, is not a hindrance. It is tedious, yes, but there's a reason why it exists. And to be very honest, similar systems exist in countries like the UK, which is why UK education is regarded, with that much of credibility by Malaysia. We are one of the huge countries which send students to the UK, and we have so many UK qualifications offered in Malaysia as well. What the pandemic has done is it has shifted things. Universities needed to deliver online, right? I'm very, very pleased to say that, because we were receiving a lot of inquiries about this at that point, I'm very pleased to say that MQA was one of the first QA bodies that came up very quickly with a strong statement saying they are open to flexibility, whether that flexibility is in delivery or that flexibility is in assessment. So that was really welcome news, because we have, as I said, so many UK qualifications being delivered in Malaysia, what we call transnational education, or TNE, right? However, what we are looking at is, what is that going to look like in the long term? People's mindsets have shifted, right? Do they really now want to do, you mentioned, Dato, about 2+1 and 3+1 or whatever it is, right? Do they really want to do that +1? Why not do it all in Malaysia and look at the expertise we have in Malaysia itself in terms of the academic expertise? We are fantastic in Malaysia that our academia is one of the strongest. So do we really need lecturers to come in from the UK to deliver it? Or can we look at Malaysian equivalent lecturers and academics who can deliver such qualifications? So I think these are some of the new issues that have come in. And for this, what we would love to do through platforms like the UK Malaysia University Consortium is to look at how we can navigate some of these, so-called barriers, but they're actually changes that have happened because of the pandemic and because of the appetite. People are more looking at, I don't really need to go to the UK to get a qualification. Can I get it here? And get it with that similar level of credibility and rigor that I can get in the UK, right? But for that, you need to have flexibility. You need to have clear processes in place. So whilst in answer to your question, whilst it might seem like it's tedious and is it necessary? It is necessary. It makes our education system very, very credible at all levels, and it gives overseas universities the confidence to come here and work within our systems. But at the same time, we also learn from each other on how to be more flexible in a process like this, in a time like this, where we need to be really agile, for want of a better word, and we really need to move forward with MOOCs, with digital delivery, with ODL, and with upskilling the talent that we have locally.
Yes. Thank you, Prabha. We have 10 minutes, about 10 minutes left, and I would like to invite the floor actually to ask a couple of questions if they have. And at the end of it, I would like to get our panel speakers to give their own their own closing remarks or whatever it is, and put some sort of summary to that. So may I invite anyone from the floor? Put my glasses to see. All right, at the back there. Can you have mention a name, please, and from where you're from?
Hello, thanks a lot for the valuable insights. My name is Mohammed Nasif. I'm just graduated here in Malaysia. I'm originally from Egypt. My question is mostly for Professor David. I really like the insights when it comes to the holistic education and shifting the focus to holistic education. But I think the main challenge is shifting the mindset of the students from focusing on grades and academic excellence to the actual learning. But as long as the assessment and the evaluation methods only focuses on grades as the only tangible evidence of achievements, students will by default focus on the grades because it's the only tangible effect. Human skills is really important, but it's the main challenge how you can really assess and provide a standardized recognition of achievements in human skills. How can that be done? And as you said, with technical knowledge become available on Coursera, edX, on online platforms, do you think now the role of the universities or the real value they are offering would be on the part of providing enriching experiences, engagement opportunities, and holistic competency-based education, and using experiential learning to achieve this goal?
Thank you. Yes, we need to hear the questions. That is important. Please, Prof.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. There's a mantra in the education world that assessment drives learning, and I don't fully agree with it, but it is certainly there, and what you're pointing out is absolutely correct. The reality is that as long as universities and higher education institutions and schools concentrate on knowledge, which largely assessments do, it's going to continue to drive students to just accumulate facts and so on. And there's a quote from Albert Einstein who said, education is not the accumulation of facts, but the training of the mind to think. And that's the difference. Now, there are assessment methods that can look at that more clearly. I mean, one thing I'd like to introduce even in our own institution is sort of more open book learning, which is, can you actually find the sources that actually very quickly that are asked to, online to actually determine sort of some of the actual factual side of things, because, we know everybody here knows that we're still feeding students with a lot of facts, memorization and various things like that, when you can actually find it far quicker on your smartphone. And why are we still doing this? When in fact, in the medical field as well, there's some excellent resources that I would use in my clinical practice as a doctor, that within a sort of 5-10 minute consultation, I would be discussing with the patient what was online, so there's those sort of things. Some of the softer skills are a bit more difficult to assess, but they are definitely there. It's just that largely the shift in mentality that you spoke about in students hasn't fully occurred in academia either. And so until that shift fully occurs, we're not going to get the assessment methods that are actually there. And I think even I alluded to it before, there's a need for more research as to how robust those areas are, because even some of the better sort of psychological measures, we find that actually you can learn how to do well in them. So just by learning to ace the test rather than actually being able to demonstrate the skills and so on. But there are lots of methods that actually are to do with assessment. Some of them are used in medicine, which are more observed methods of assessment, which therefore are more expensive and pushes the cost of education up and so on and so forth. But they're definitely there.
Thank you. Yes, please, second question. I think we can have one more after that, and then we're going to move on to closing remarks. Yeah. Thank you.
Good afternoon. A very interesting forum. Right, I think we have picked up a lot of issues on the rise of the digitalization era. Sorry, before that, my name is Madeha. I'm from Newcastle University. I'm the Dean of Biomedical Sciences. Right, so our program is a 2+1. Just as Ms. Prabha said, there's a lot of opportunities for exchange and students' globalization. She also mentioned about the digital era now, where we can actually do a lot more than just physically exchange students. And I like it how Ms. Wei was talking about the demand of digital competency, but I also pick up from Prof. David about employability and the emotional intelligence. Now my question is, are there any thoughts or any strategies on humanizing digital experience? Because we talk about digital a lot, but really the digital or the emotional intelligence and the human experience is something that's really important that we agree. So I open it to any of the panels to question. Thank you.
Can I get you probably to answer that question? Is it okay? Yeah, thank you.
Humanizing digital experiences.
Yes, that's right, humanizing. I thought you did mention that earlier. Yeah.
I think
a
that's,
brief answer.
Yeah, sure. I think that that's a very interesting question. Perhaps sometimes we see that digital is sort of like different, or separate to humans. But in fact, we can see that actually machines, if you look at the functions of machines and the motivations of machines, it's never going to replace humans, right? And we actually designed these digital technology and these machineries in order to improve our standard living. And improve the way that we do things. So looking at it in that sense, then I would definitely think that actually digital technology is here to serve humans, and I'm not really sure how to answer that question. So yeah, I think that's my perspective.
Is there anyone who would like to come in to adapt to that, Prof? Yeah?
Yeah, I'd just add, because it was striking me even before that, we are human beings, and one of the major determinants of longevity, how long we live, is actually our social relationships. And those are largely based, the research is largely based on physical relationships. Being married, you tend to live longer. Those who are married may not believe that, but you do. And et cetera, et cetera. So I would agree. The digital transformation we're going through is to serve us, not to become replacements for the actual physical relationships that we actually have to have as human beings, which are so important.
I can't agree with you more. I think we look at Bhutan, I think for that matter, yeah? Right, thank you so much. Is there one more question we can have? Otherwise, I'm going to ask our, yes, please. Okay. Yes. Oh, sorry. Can you read it? You read it, please. It's too small. These young people, they write very small. Then I have to admit that I'm not that young anymore. There's a question from Prof. Ilan, I think, Elijah? Very quickly, we don't have much time. I don't want to really lose out on having your opinion, especially from you. You have not...
Was it just me? Sorry.
Just a question, yes, please, yeah.
This is a question from Prof. Ilan Solaj. He says, in spite of institutions giving great importance to employable skills which are embedded in the curriculum, yet we always get complaints from employers that our graduates are not market ready. Why?
Okay, who can answer this? Can you answer that question? TFM?
Sorry, just to confirm the question, because I didn't really quite hear it clearly.
I think despite of having good education and so on, but yet I think we still have issues of, not being employed, unemployability. Is that the question? Yeah, what could be the reason here?
Okay, what could be the reason for unemployability? I think it could be, I think that it's very multifaceted, but I guess one of the reasons could be depending on the kind of focus areas that a student or graduate focuses on, like when they graduate. So sometimes some of our graduates may not have the communication skills that are needed. So they could go through the whole school system and they could go through the whole university system, still not having the necessary soft skills that all the employers have mentioned, like that is needed. So that's probably one of the reasons. And I think that also then brings us to what is the kind of method that we actually assess, whether it's students or whether it's graduates. Like, are we assessing them holistically, or are we focusing a lot on academics such that they are able to graduate and able to excel academically, but are not then able to carry themselves as how employers would want or are looking for at a workplace?
Thank you. Probably since you're already on the mic, you might want to just say, do a little bit of a closing remarks.
Sure. Okay, sure.
I'm just stealing a little bit of time, 5 minutes, yeah?
So I think, so I think I've spoken about the kind of leadership that we need and how we are, from a Teach for Malaysia's perspective, how we are actually growing the leadership of students as well as our fellows and our staff members. But I don't mean to bring in a new point here, but I would be remiss to not bring up this point, which is, I think if you're thinking about talent, it's not just merely employing great talent, but there's also a role that employers actually play that is so important these days in terms of retaining and also developing talent as well. Yeah. So I think from an employer perspective, I think it's even more important because now the fact that we are still in a pandemic and a lot of workplaces are either still working from home or having a hybrid work policy, how do we create that sense of belonging, and how do we give that flexibility and also compassion and empathy to the employees to be able to really bring their best self or bring their whole self to work. So that it's not merely a transactional experience that they are having with work, but at the same time, it's a very humanizing experience when they come to work. And one of a quote that I've heard before, which I really liked, is, how can we make the workplace and how can we make work a source of well-being instead of impacting your well-being?
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Can I move to a Prof? Probably you want to say a few words. I am taking a little bit of time, 5 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
I suppose the major thing I'd say is that, we're lifelong learners, and we've paid lip service to it, but right from birth to death, whether we engage in it actively or we just let it happen passively, it's there. So therefore, there needs to be an integration right the way through life, right from very young age right through to retirement, of all of the people that are involved in it, the educators, the employers, the carers, etc., and a real sort of engagement to actually ensure that what we're promoting amongst individuals in society is that lifelong learning.
Yeah. Thank you, and over to you. A few words, yeah, please.
I think to summarize my thoughts for this topic of filling in the post-pandemic or pandemic and post-pandemic gap would be, well, there's always going to be job opportunities out there, more jobs being created, even as jobs are being displaced. So I suppose one closing thought is every individual's agency to find out what they're really interested in, what they're really good at, and how do they really want to contribute to the world. Because definitely if an individual can answer that, then the world is theirs, right? To claim, to seize those opportunities or create those opportunities for themselves.
Thank you. I'm just going to give a very short one. I think we were talking about filling the human capital gaps in the post-pandemic. I just want to mention a couple of the keywords that we were talking about, and these are actually aligned totally to whatever topic that we have. One actually is changing mindset. It is a must, whether we like it or not, whether it is at the policy level, the students level, or parents level. Secondly, embracing technology at all levels for that matter. Flexibility in policy and delivery of contents. This will apply to the ministry, the government, as well as university and schools. So we need to have that flexibility in policy and delivery of contents. We are fantastic with our documents, but we are not really fantastic with delivery. Assessment, curriculum, and pedagogy. These are, when we are in this time, in the pandemic time, or whatever it is, or hybrid and so on, we need to relook at our assessment. We cannot assess like what we used to do. We cannot actually have examination like what it used to be, whether it is in school or in the university. And curriculum need to be a lot more flexible. We can't actually stick to curriculum that is being written in the book. Allow students, allow teachers, lecturers to be empowered for that matter, and as well as pedagogy. So the way pedagogy is applied in teaching and learning will have to be different. And I think the importance of social skills, the importance of value system. I would want to include value system for that matter, because it comes from the very early age. So thank you so much.
Sorry, just Prabha? Yeah.
Sorry, Prabha. Oh, I'm so sorry,
No
Prabha.
worries.
You see, you're absent. That's the reason why. Prabha,
No
please,
worries,
thank you.
no worries.
My apologies.
So just no worries. Just some final words on it. So whilst we have spoken a lot about the traditional outlook on universities, that they are the source of knowledge and discipline-based knowledge, we should also not lose track of the importance of higher education as a tool for developing cross-cultural and transnational understanding. Because when we talk about human capital needs and gaps and employability skills, that's the kind of skills that we need. And it's only on the basis of such equal communication that we can create that kind of human capital that can actually function in the future of work as we move forward.
Thank you. Once again, I would like to thank our panel speakers, and probably will say we will do it the usual conventional way. Thank you to all our speakers here, esteemed speakers.
Thank you.
And I also personally, I would like to thank KSI, Tan Sri, for giving me this opportunity again to be part of your program once again. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And I find today's lesson for me, it was another lesson. So it's lifelong learning. I learned something. Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Dato' Satina. For the panelists, there will be a photography session.